This is not the full Homestead preview, but we are going to discuss a question that I have brought upon myself. Is this the most powerful, strong championship four we have ever seen in this format? Started back in 2014, so it's not a lot of history to look at. So it's not like a ton to compare to, 5 other years to compare to, but I think it is a good argument. So we're going to talk about it. I did some math. It wasn't like rocket science, but I added numbers because I can add numbers and why not? But we're going to look at that. We're going to see the impact of stage racing, how much that has changed it, and just some of the other numbers between all the championship fours that we've had. And if this year is the best, we're going to talk about competitive standpoints, how guys have been running in the year versus when they get to the championship four, or maybe just wins in general. So this year, the championship four obviously is Truex, Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Denny Hamlin. This is a good solid four. Combined wins, 21 wins out of the 35 races so far this season. That is a lot of wins between the four. Truex has the most with 7, then Hamlin with 6. Harvick and Busch both have 4. And obviously, prior to the championship race, one of those is likely going to win, so that would add on another one. All the other ones, I did the wins prior to Homestead, so the champions do not have the amount of wins they had that season. This is all prior to Homestead. So, for example, 2018, Logano only had 2 wins going into Homestead. Truex only had 7 in 2017, and on and on and on and on. I actually made a mistake real quick. I got to change Jimmy Johnson. I gave him 5. But so, if you look at the wins, the most wins in a year by the championship four combined was last year. The big 3, they had a combined 20 wins, and then add Logano's 2. That's 22 wins compared to this year's 21 wins. This year's would be the second most wins by a championship four combined going into Homestead. Third would be 2017, 17 combined wins. Truex with 7, Busch with 5, Keselowski with 3, Harvick with 2. So obviously the stage racing really has put a gap because the most before stage racing was 15 and the other 2 were 10 and 9. 2016 had 15 combined wins. 2015 had 9 wins, and then 2014 had 10 combined wins. So obviously stage racing has built that buffer now, and we have seen the better drivers, the more consistent drivers, even they have problems, they have those playoff points to build up on, and that they are able to pull away or they're able to keep a gap and outrun some of these other guys. Like some outliers, we'll talk about the competitive standpoint in a minute, but when it comes to the wins, 2018 had the most, this year has the second most. Just moving on into the consistency thing, I think that's a very big one. We saw it in 2014 and 2015. Some guys made the championship four that I don't think would have guessed made the championship four, or at least weren't supposed to. 2014, we saw Ryan Newman and Denny Hamlin make it. They had good years, don't get me wrong, but Ryan Newman didn't win a race in 2014. Denny Hamlin only had 1 race win. They didn't have the best years of their career. They had good years, but they didn't have great championship level years versus Logano, who had 5 wins going into it, Harvick, who had 4 wins going into it, and Newman and Hamlin beat out guys like Jeff Gordon, who had 4 wins that year, Keselowski, who had 5 or 6 that year. So they beat out some pretty good guys due to the situation they were given. But if there was stage racing, obviously they would have been eliminated, but this was prior to stage racing. And that's why there is a change, so these situations are very unlikely to happen. That's why I think it was made at least. 2015, we saw Gordon make it to the championship four. He got his first win of the season late at Martinsville, the first race of the round in 8 to get him into the championship four. He hadn't had a good year. I hate to admit it, but Gordon should not have been in that championship four. It was really cool for him, his last run in the 24 car, to be running for a championship, but let's be honest, he didn't deserve to be there. If you were looking at just how he had been doing all year, he had to make it in on points. He hadn't been running great in points all year. He wasn't up front in points. So I love that he was there. Don't get me wrong. That was a fun race. That was happy times. But 2014, he deserved to make it for sure. 2015, not so much. He just didn't have a year. Truex, he only had 1 win, but he had a better year than Gordon for sure. I was up there in points probably. He just had a better year. And then Busch with 4 wins. Obviously, he missed the first 11 races that year. A very controversial championship just due to the fact he missed all those races. Was given the waiver by NASCAR and went on to win the championship. Harvick had 3 wins that year. Had a really good year overall. 2016, Jimmy Johnson, the champion, had 4 wins going into this year. This was a solid 4, I believe. Johnson with 4 wins, Logano with 3 wins, Edwards with 3 wins, and Busch with 4 wins. So when it comes to wins, that was a solid year. But honestly, the way Jimmy Johnson had been performing in this playoff system in the past, no one would have bet on Jimmy Johnson just because he had had the worst luck in this playoff system the 2 years prior. Edwards and Busch, obviously, solid. Logano, solid. I say that was a solid 4. 2017, I think there was a gap there with, it was like Truex, Busch, Harvick, Keselowski. So I think they had a gap, and it showed there at the end. Truex and Busch were able to pull a gap on the field. Larson ended up 3rd in that race, I believe, a non-playoff driver. But Truex and Busch definitely the best 2 that year, and there was a little bit of a gap from a competition standpoint, and it definitely showed in that final race. Last year, obviously, the big 3. Even though none of them won it, I would have not bet on Logano. Guessed Logano would have won it. I don't think a lot of people would have guessed Logano to win it, but he went out there and won it. It just proves what the system can do. Logano was consistent that year, don't get me wrong, but he just didn't have the year that the other 3 had. Like, Busch had 8 wins, Harvick had 8 wins, Truex had 4 wins, was up there in points. So Logano ended up with 3 wins on the season. I mean, it's not like he was leading points all year or anything. He got there, and he got that win at Martinsville, and that's the only reason he made it. If it wasn't for that win at Martinsville, he wouldn't have made it at all, and probably one of the big 3 would have won the championship. If Chase Elliott made the Final 4 that year, if Kurt Busch made the Final 4 that year, I think the big 3 would have beaten anyone else, but Logano just happened to get that Martinsville win, had an advantage getting to build that car early, and went on to win the championship. Don't get me wrong, it was a great run for that team, but honestly, that was the big 3 that year. They just gapped the whole freaking field that year. So obviously you had that. And then this year, from a competitive standpoint, I'd say this might be the most competitive year. These guys have run up front in points all year. They've won the most races. They've really put a gap on the field, I would say. Kyle Busch led the points all year in the regular season. Him and Logano had a nice little battle there for the regular season points. Harvick, even though he struggled in the first half of the season, he was still top 5 in points, and then he started winning. He got a win at New Hampshire, got a win at Michigan, got a win at Indy, and most recently won at Texas. Truex, he didn't have a slow start coming into JGR. He came out winning. He's won 7 races so far. Denny Hamlin, he's had a good year. He started off the year with a Daytona 500 win, got another quick win at Texas, and he's been able to win the second half of the season consistently. Pocono, Bristol, Kansas, Phoenix, he's been able to do really good. And then Kyle Busch, obviously, as I said, the points really helps the case for this championship for that he's had a really good points year. The first half of the year, he was killing it. He had 4 wins, and he hasn't won since Pocono in June, but he's still had a good year points-wise. The playoffs, he hasn't done too hot, which is kind of hurts the case for this year, I would say. But I would say I think there's a good case for this year that this is the best championship for, just because of the consistency with all 4 of these drivers, the amount of wins, how they've done in points this year. They've all 4 been very consistent this year, I would say. Even with Busch's playoff struggles, I would say they've been pretty consistent. Hamlin's been pretty consistent all year. Truex has been consistent. Harvick, even though it took him a while to win, they've been consistent. Here's a reminder, if Kevin Harvick does win the championship this year, don't forget that Spire Motorsports won before Stewart-Haas Racing, the championship team. Just throwing that out there. I'll probably mention it again in my Championship 4 preview video, but I think there's a good case for this year. Other years, I'd say even with Logano like sneaking in there, I think 2018 is a good argument, 2016 even, but I don't think you can make an argument for 2014 or 2015. That's a tough one to make. And then 2017, just Truex and Busch had done so well that year. It's hard to even mention, but yeah, that's it. Is it? It's really tough to say. There's no definite answer. Different people have their opinions. I would say yes, just because they've been the most consistent out of any other of these groups of 4. But yeah, I think it's a very good argument, a very good discussion point, something fun to talk about. Tomorrow's video, it's the last race at Homestead for a championship for now. I might do a tribute video, or I might do another idea. I'm thinking about looking back at 2014, that whole situation. Did Jeff Gordon intentionally give that one away so the championship drivers could duke it out at the end there? Would have Jeff Gordon had won the championship that year? Yes, he would have. But then what's tomorrow? Wednesday? Thursday, Truck Series preview. Friday, Xfinity Series preview. Sunday, Cup Series preview. And I might do live stream reactions to the Truck and Xfinity. Cup Series is a no right now because schedules. But I will be watching it for sure. Just really checking it out. I don't know what else to say about it. But yeah, it'll be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. 2019's Championship 4, very competitive. I honestly, for my Championship 4, I'll say this again, but I'm honestly struggling with which driver to pick. I have who I want to win, obviously, but from an unbiased standpoint, it's very hard to choose between these four. They've all four been so good this year, and it's going to be hard to pick one. I think I could be confident picking any one of them and knowing that there's a very good shot they could win the championship. I haven't been able to say that in years past. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun no matter what. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, share, and all that stuff.